Welcome to the Renewing Your Faith podcast, where we open the scriptures and make them relevant. If you are afraid of truth, you may not need to be here. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to the podcast. This week I am your host. We hope that you have an interesting time of listening and of learning, because this will be an interesting session. This is the first one we were doing. We hope you listen to the podcasts that are to come. So as we start this one, let's start with a word of prayer. Elohim, Yah, we thank you for giving us life, breath, strength, and all that you give us. We thank you for guiding us through each day and showing us your way. Now we ask that you open our eyes, that we may see you and your word in its full glory. Thank you for protecting us. Thank you for guiding us. Thank you for giving us the conscious mind to stay safe. In all things, we say thank you. Today, let's start with the Torah portion. And the Torah portion, for those of you that don't know what it is the part of the scripture read by certain religions every week. Because as opposed to having a study guide, as opposed to having a process, they study a Torah portion. The Torah portion for this week is known as Bar Midbar. Bar Midbar, numbers 1 through 420. From the Gospels, you'll be reading Matthew 4:1 through 17. And in the prophets, you'll be reading Hosea 2:1 through 22. But let's just stick with Bar Midbar, which is the portion for this week. Numbers is Bar Midbar, which means wilderness. It comes from the first word of the first verse, which says, "Then the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai." Wilderness of Sinai? Sinai meaning mountain of bush. Numbers 1:1. So let's begin with Numbers 1:1. Yah spoke to Moses in the Sinai desert, or in the mountain of bush, in the tent of meeting, on the first day of the second month of the second year after they had left the land of Mitzrayim. He said, "Take a census of the entire assembly of the people of Israel, by clans and families. Record the names of all the men 20 years old and over who are subject to military service in Israel. You and Aharon are to enumerate them company by company." This is interesting because it reads slightly different in the mechanical. The mechanical being the translation that makes the Hebrew very clear if you aren't clear with the Hebrew. The mechanical reads, "And Yahweh spoke to Moshe in the wilderness of Sinai." As we were saying, Sinai means my sharp thorns. Or in Strong's, it's number 5514. Mount Sinai also means sharp thorn. Yah spoke to Moshe in the wilderness of Sinai, in the appointed tent, so the first of the second month of the second year of their going from the land of Mitzrayim, Egypt, saying, "Lift up the head of all the company of the sons of Yisrael, to their clans, to the house of their fathers, numbers and titles, of every man according to their skull." Skull being translated as the bones of their head, the roundness of their skull. Also, a census by counting of heads. Strong's number 1538, also translated to be individual. Verse 3, "From the son of 20 years and upward unto all the ones going out of the army of Yisrael, you are to register them by their armies, you and Aharon." It is interesting how the Hebrew reads slightly different than other translations. It is interesting how it states that every man was to be counted. Every man was to be accounted for, all who were in the age range to serve in the army. That age was from 20 to 50. After 50, they were to sit down. Before 20, they were too young. Do we follow this rule today? Or are we deceived by these guidelines as we are deceived by other points of information? Were women counted? No, it doesn't say count the women. There were 600,000 women. Does it say count children? No, it does not say count children. There were more children. There were men, women, and children, but only the men of working age, only the men who had task, only the men who were to perform the duties required by Elohim were to be counted. Numerous things have changed since then. Numerous things have changed culturally. Many people still look at the Old Covenant, the Old Testament to some, because there was no Old Testament and New Testament. It was Old Covenant and New Covenant, and it was all one book. There was no separation between when it was originally transliterated. Just as we've had changes to the scriptures, during this time of coronavirus, many things have changed, but the scripture has not changed. Now, the way we interpret scripture has changed because we have access to more information than ever before. But are you listening to a minister? Are you listening to a rabbi? Are you listening to someone else who's telling you what's in the scripture, or are you interpreting the scripture for yourself? Are you looking at the Hebrew? Are you looking at the scripture in depth to find out what his word says? Or are you just going along with the crowd and doing whatever they say? Throughout this week, I've allegedly heard numerous prophetic words. And of these prophetic words, I started to question what was being said. Some said there'd be numerous stimulus checks coming. I'm sorry. If you read the information correctly, there's one branch of government that is choosing not to vote on a second stimulus check because they don't want to have to send it further to have it vetoed. Also, if they were to vote on this and vote it forward, they will lose votes. Therefore, they're choosing not to vote on it in an attempt to save face and save votes. Is that deceptive? Or is that politics? The president's press secretary held up a check this week. And in holding up this check, she held up the bank transfer information. So anyone can see the check and go to the bank and look at the routing number and attempt to hack the president's account. Is this deception? Or was it a real check? The president's people say they will not deceive people by using a false check to show information. But would they show the president's routing number and other information so that others could see it and possibly hack the account? Others say that this week Bill Gates' wife was on television and she was wearing an upside-down cross. This is false. She did not wear an upside-down cross, though numerous media outlets are reporting this. If you will do the research, she was wearing a piece of jewelry that had a representation of a cross. But when you do a close-up and look at it clearly, anyone who says that it was an upside-down cross is deceiving you. This week they say H.R. 6666 was passed, which means that states have the right to invade your house and search. This is not true. This is deception coming from other markets. If you look at it closely and verify the information, what H.R. 6666 calls for is this. H.R. 6666 was introduced to the House of Representatives earlier this month, called the COVID-19 Testing, Research, and Contracting Everyone Trace Act. It was designed to fund testing and contact tracing in medically underserved communities and spots. There are those questions being posed. Does H.R. 6666 give the government the power to forcibly test you in your home and take you away for quarantining? The answer is no. The bill does not make testing for individuals mandatory and never once suggests that you will be removed from your home. The bill says It authorizes the Secretary of Health and Human Services to award grants to eligible entities to conduct diagnostic testing of COVID-19 and related activities such as contact tracing through mobile health units as necessary. So it does award grants to entities to conduct tracing at people's homes. But it doesn't say there's mandatory testing anywhere. Also this week, if you had to update your cell phone in any way, you now have a contact tracing app on your phone that is sending your information to the government, but you have to activate the app. You have to go and find out how to remove this app from your phone and remove it so that you will no longer have the tracing app on your phone sending your information to the government. We find it interesting that this week the Pope had a special day of prayer. The Pope had numerous people of different denominations coming in to celebrate prayer with him. But what day does the Pope worship on? The Pope knows the true Sabbath. The Pope knows the day of worship. Whether he chooses to keep it or not is questionable. And this week, Ravi Zachariah died. Ravi Zachariah, a true stalwart of the word, who knew his word inside and out. But what's interesting when you watch one of his presentations, when you watch it in detail, a gentleman stands up and said, you don't have to study numerous religions to know of the world's belief systems. People think it will be a monumental task to study all religious beliefs to have an understanding of what religion is. But basically, there are only 3 belief systems in the world. There are belief systems that believe that only universe exists. The universe controls everything. And there are belief systems that believe only atheism exists. There is no God, and I'm only using the word God so that you have an understanding of where I'm going. And therefore, nothing is controlling anything. And then there's the belief system that there is God and universe. That God created the universe. Therefore, God is in control of all things. These belief systems are Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and everything that has come out of them becomes a new belief system. Initially, there was the Hebrew belief system, which became Judaism through Abraham and Islam through Ishmael. As we go further down the timeline and we find Yeshua, after the death of Yeshua, after his resurrection, we find that there were those who started Christianity. Christianity is an offshoot of Judaism. Judaism is an offshoot of the Hebraic belief. And before that, there was all Ilya. You have to understand it and read it for yourself. I know this seems controversial. I know some of these things seem questionable. But continue to question. Continue to read. Continue to see where the information will lead you if you read it for yourself. And continue to be blessed in every way.